You trying to make a top 10 fight in the entire series? Why only top 10? Let's make it top 5. What's up, guys? Up here, and yes, here we are to talk about why I personally believe that Hakari versus Uraume has potential to be a top 5, maybe even top 3 fight in the entire wonderful, magical, totally pure, nothing bad ever happens to any beloved character series known as Jujutsu Kaisen. We got a lot to talk about, so let's not waste any more time. What's up, guys? Pencil here. Fun fact, I have it on me, and I keep it on me at all times. And unfortunately, Hakari don't really got it on him like that. And neither does Uraume. But they be making it like that, so they got some stuff to them. So there are multiple reasons why I think Hakari vs. Uraume can be super duper interesting, and honestly, at least for me, a top 5 fight, and maybe even for the general populace, you know what I'm talking about? And let's hop into why. Number 1, the characters that are specifically fighting, and I mean specifically their characters and their general roles within the narrative so far. Uraume is honestly a I don't want to just say wild card, but they're just a strange character in general. Like, we know very little about them, how they got to their position, how they maintain their position, how crazy they are. Well, we know they're relatively crazy. Like, it's not too surprising to how crazy they are. But still, in terms of overall information, we have zero, nothing on Uraume. We just know they've been around for a hot minute. They've been whipping it up in the kitchen for Sukuna for who knows how long, probably even before he became the true proper king of curses. And they've been alive for apparently 1,000 years. Like, we don't know if they have like an immortality technique or anything, or if they just incarnated in a new vessel. That's never been clarified. And considering they look exactly the same, that could just be a case of where they properly incarnated like all the other reincarnated players, or not. No idea. That's a big mystery behind Uraume. And thusly, their position in the narrative has set them up for an extremely intense battle in the future. And considering who they're fighting, they're in for an extremely intense battle. And let's hop to the other character that we know much more about, yet simultaneously is still just as interesting. Hakari Kinshi, the restless gambler. The main reason I'm so excited to see Hakari fight again is because I feel like his fight against Kashimo kind of didn't show all he could do. And I know that feels weird to say, right? Because, like, right, he's a domain merchant. What else do you expect him to do? But I expect some more special effects, some more fun stuff. Notably, in the battle against Kashimo, in a similar vein to what you can apply to the battle with Yuta, Hakari wasn't really going all out. He wasn't really trying to get Kashimo out of here. He knew, needed, desired, was itching and scratching for them points. And thusly, he was holding back a little bit, or at least holding back any techniques that could hypothetically, considering things that we didn't see empowered by Jackpot, like the doors outside of the domain, the ball outside of the domain. Who knows what other aspects of his domain we don't know about? There are so many things about Hakari Kinshi that are still up in the air about his abilities, but we'll get more into that in a second. The main reason I'm so excited to see Hakari fight is because he is probably the most reckless fighter in the entire series. I'd say even more reckless than characters like Gojo and Sukuna. And don't get me wrong, both of those characters are taking massive risks in their 14-chapter fight. But that doesn't mean that they're as restless and risk-free, or at least they believe risk-free, and gambling as Hakari Kinshi. Remember, the man perished like 5 times. I think more. Because he got the first bolt, which got him up out of here. Technically, he should have perished after losing his arm, but, he regenerated. He got the Ultra Lucky Jackpot, which came right after he got his whole torso blown out. Bro even managed to pull off a binding vow to sacrifice his arm in order to save the rest of him. Bro has been living on the edge since day one. And he lives, ironically enough, for the heat, for the fever, for the passion. And Uraume is what? A deity of ice, who has the exact opposite of what Hakari has. Devout loyalty, no risks, a strict mindset. And thusly, seeing these two opposing ideologies, someone who lives their own life, lives for risk, chases that fever, that desire, that chaos that comes with it, versus someone who obediently follows behind, watches from afar, and will only step in when they believe that they need to. That is a battle that is going to be super interesting to see. Simply their ideologies bouncing off one another. Because remember, on a subconscious level, on a lower level than anybody else, or anything else within a fight within JJK. There's usually some sort of ideological battle or some sort of character battle going on. And I think Uraume and Hakari, despite both being, I don't want to say relatively new characters, because Uraume does appear at the end of the Shibuya incident, and Hakari is mentioned much earlier on in the series, around the Goodwill arc, I do believe. But still, they've only been really introduced and starting to pop off in the back half of the series. While Hakari does have an extended fight against Kashimo, that's pretty much all he has, outside of a little interaction with Yuji, Panda, and crew. So thusly, these are two characters who have existed in the background, who due to their positions of power, whether it be hype from Satoru Gojo, on top of being a third year from Jujutsu High, or the other being the chef of Ryomen Sukuna itself, we're in a really interesting position to see two characters from high places really starting to box and throw hands. So that's interesting part number one. Number two, the extra interesting part for me, their abilities and how they match up. So, notably, we know how Hakari's domain works. We had a whole double-page spread explaining it. I do not know how Hakari's domain. Okay, I'll admit, you can probably go back to my review of it. My eyes straight glazed over. Too much text. I didn't read it all. But we know for a fact that Hakari has a whole lot to offer with his domain that we may have not seen yet. And Uraume also has a whole lot to offer with their ability, because realize both of these characters have fought like Hakari thrice, once against Yuji, once against Charles, once against Kashimo. And Uraume, I wouldn't say anything they've done is really like a fight. It's either one stop, it's either one-sided or one-sided. Uraume against Jujutsu High alongside Kenjaku, a slaughter, where Yuki comes in and shuts them down. Uraume versus Gojo. It's almost unfair to call that a versus, considering Uraume got one tap before they could finish their sentence. And then Uraume versus Maki. Well, Maki and Yuji. But to be fair, it's also a bit unfair to call that a versus, because they definitely third-partied that fight. They 100% third-party. But that still doesn't mean that with that limited screen time, only very few appearances, we've actually seen all that they can offer. Ice is a very diverse ability, and thusly the levels of creation, destruction, and sanity that Uraume could whip up are literally endless when you truly begin to think about it. They could go the Domo route from Demon Slayer. They could go the Aokiji route from One Piece. They could even go a weird hybrid route like Shoujo Todoroki from My Hero Academia. There are so many directions you can take Ice, especially with a character like Uraume, where there's literally everything and nothing on the table. Sure, we've seen their maximum output Frost Calm, but we have not seen everything that's below that, in between that. We haven't seen an actual maximum. Notably, Uraume is one of the vaguest characters we have. We don't know the name of their technique. It's just an unnamed ice technique. We don't know their maximum. We don't know if they have a domain expansion, and if they do, what they can do with it. We don't know the upper limits of the ice technique and any of its basic ramifications. Nothing like that. And the same thing applies to Hakari. We know he do go main. He do go main. He does go. I almost said it again. He does domain. He gets the Jack of Pots. And he goes crazy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That's all we know. He could have way more. He could use things in a way different light. Hopefully the doors and the balls come back outside of the domain. He only used it like barely against Yuji, and I think that was only the doors. So seeing him wield that could be very, very interesting. Especially considering where these characters scale relative to each other, which is kind of nebulous. AKA, I genuinely have zero idea where or how they scale. Because when you look at it like this, Uraume just has weird feats. Weird. Like, just strange. We know they're lower than Satoru Gojo. Shock, horror, everyone except for one character in the verse. Maybe two. Who knows? Maybe Kashimo will get up there. You never know. But everyone except for one character in the verse is also below Gojo. Shock, horror. Oh, no. They lost to the strongest sorcerer of the modern day. Oh, wow. Crazy. But they sold all of Jujutsu High. Admittedly, a post-Shibuya Jujutsu High, and obviously the whole cast and crew was likely a decent bit tired, and anyone who wasn't tired was fodder. I'm looking at you, you piece of filth, you disgusting waste of space. You know exactly what you are, you filthy creature. But with that being the case, soloing on Jujutsu High casually is crazy. Casually palming a piercing blood, though admittedly it did pierce them, you know, as per piercing blood standards, is pretty impressive. The fact that Yuji Itadori, on a 120% post-Mahito fight amp, was a few black flashes deep into the zone, casually got blitzed, and was about to get one-tapped by Uraume, along with the entire rest of the cast, to the point where Yuki Sakuma, one of 4 special grades, and really at the time, the only other special, well, no, Yuta, the one of 2 free special grades had to show up and save everybody with a technique that is super built to hard counter Uraume. Pretty impressive. Uraume just no selling post Sakurajima Maki after Maki looks directly at Uraume, the same Maki that is precog, the same Maki that's equal to Toji in every single way, shape, and form, the same Maki who's above post-liberated Yuji, who is a monster and a demon in of himself, the same Maki that is an absolute beast and maybe argued to be, they make sure they're on around. Maybe argued to be like a top 5 speed character in the verse, and maybe even top 3. Okay, not top 3, because Kashima's faster now. But still, top 5 speed character in the verse. Uraume ran in and said no. Shut him down instantaneously. And no, Uraume was not close. Like, you can go back to the chapter where we see the end of the Sukuna versus Maki, Sukuna versus Maki and Yuji fight. And Uraume appears, releases so much slaughtering intent that they can feel it in China, and proceeds to just blitz, freeze Maki instantaneously with maximum output frost calm. So Uraume, really, really up there. Hakari Kenji, he once again kind of suffers from void status to where he exists. Neat. He only fought Kashimo Hajime, who also existed in a void. Neat. But with that being the case, still fighting Kashimo Hajime, as we see, with how base Kashimo doesn't get immediately annihilated by Sukuna, that's not too bad. That's pretty impressive indeed. And in Jackpot, he's got that Jack juice on him. And when he's on a roll, he's even stronger than Yuta Okotsu, according to Yuta and I believe an external guidebook statement. So that's how powerful Hakari is, and that can get a little bit tragic. Obviously, you have Uraume, who's up there in terms of speed, and the rest of their stats are up there too. Don't sleep on their power or their durability. Once again, being able to palm piercing blood without it piercing straight through their hand, being able to survive a blitz gut punch from Satoru Gojo. All this stuff is very, very impressive for Uraume, and Hakari has impressive accolades of his own by going bar for bar, word for word, with Kashimo Hajime, mostly in Jackpot, but even sometimes in base, and even somewhat outscaling a base Kashimo with Jackpot towards the end of the rounds. So these two are in that pretty high tier of raw power. Are they anywhere near the tiers of characters like Kenjaku or Sukuna or Go? No. We both know that if they were to run into any of them, they would get washed. Yes, I'm saying Kenjaku slams Jackpot Hakari. If you have an issue with that, don't worry. I'm going to make a video on it soon enough. But with that being the case, Uraume is the one who could really decide the fate of this matchup. Because the question is, how good do you think their ice is? And how good do you think they are at using it? Because here's the thing with Hakari Kenji. He is a monster, a beast, and a menace. Even when faced with a bolt that was meant to tear straight through his head and just annihilate him, because that's where RCT comes from, the man literally ate the bolt, went, that's a little bit spicy, and breathed the electricity straight out his nose. So we know Hakari, he can get up to some nonsense when he's on Jackpot. But the thing is, the big issue is that Uraume is a monster. A monster way above the tier of base Hakari. So that's the big issue, and the one thing that's going to hold this fight back at the start. Hakari's gonna need a Jackpot, bro. There's nothing, and I mean nothing, that really suggests that base Hakari's out here soloing all of Jujutsu High. Both schools. There's really nothing to suggest that base Hakari's out here I don't know, tagging post-Sakurajima Maki while yelling at her, well, not really yelling at her, while posing up with all the slaughtering 10 and 5 galaxies and looking dead in their direction and freezing them anyway. Uraume pretty much dogs on base Hakari, but presuming Hakari's Kinji's luck does not run out instantaneously, he's going to hit that jackpot. And then we have a very interesting scenario where we have someone who can create terrain, shields, weapons of all various varieties and various different shapes at will, and someone who can punch really, really, really good and survive pretty much any sort of extreme damage that they would take. So, if you want to lean towards the Hakari side of the battle, then you get this mad, endless curse energy monster that simply melts through everything that Uraume has to offer, or even uses the balls and doors to break down a lot of the structures that Uraume tries to put up in order to stall Hakari. On the other hand, though, you run into a big issue, because remember, the big thing with Hakari's jackpot is that it only lasts for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And remember, unfortunately, unlike most, Hakari's domain instantly snitches on itself. Instantaneously. The moment you are trapped in it, you get every last bit of data that you could possibly need on the domain. Do you understand it? It depends on the caliber of person. If I had Hakari's domain information shoved straight into my head, I wouldn't understand it. But for someone like Uraume, someone who's been around for a hot minute, has probably played in the casino once or twice with Kinjaku while waiting for Sukuna to incarnate themselves, it may be a bit of trouble for Hakari. Because remember, sure, let's be super generous to Hakari and assume he's able to keep it with someone who's able to perception blitz post-Sakurajima Maki. He'd only be able to do that when he's got the juice on him. When he got the juice pumping through his veins. What happens when he doesn't have the juice pumping through his veins? What happens when right as that 4 minutes and 11 seconds is about to end up, that 4 minutes, 10 seconds, 0.59 is right there, and Uraume is like, oh, we got you, dog. And boom, freezes Hakari before the domain can pop off. Before he can move to activate Idle Death Gamble again. That could be awful. That could be tragic. Maybe a bit of a new panic. How do you get around that? The main way I could see Hakari getting around being frozen and instantly one-tapped, even in base, is the idea that, well, if this automatic RCT is meant to defend him from literally anything and everything his opponent could throw at him, because the body's just healing and trying to fight itself off, I would not be shocked if, when frozen, Hakari, if he's in jackpot, or maybe even about to go into one, he maintains this sort of elevated heat. His body temperature is so much higher than a regular human being's because that's the body's, and thusly RCT's, way of combating ice. Think of it as like really, 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 really intense shivering. So instead of him just being, or I suppose if he's specifically trying to go in a Idle Death Gamble, instead of him being frozen like that, due to the excess of heat that's flowing around him and through him thanks to the overflowing amount of cursed energy, then he would simply break through an open domain again. And the big issue, once again, for Hakari, if he doesn't have anything else, is that Uraume has proven relatively bulky. Just taking one singular hit from Gojo Satoru and not immediately puking their lunch everywhere, unlike a certain gambler and a certain blessed child, it could be the fact that we see arguably one of the biggest battles of attrition that we've seen in the entire series, where one side is consistently trying to lock down, freeze, shut down the other, but the other's just busting a move and melting through everything. That's that interesting part of the matchup. Uraume could either be Hakari's worst nightmare in the sense that they could freeze the slots, freeze him right before he goes to open another jackpot, freezes him in any awkward situation where Hakari cannot easily compensate, or he ends up in a situation where his body just keeps adapting, keeps changing, and that's where the extra part of the fun of this fight comes in. Due to all the unknowns, due to the natures of these characters, due to how their abilities match up, due to everything, especially the narrative stakes of these characters, which I'll get into in a second, this fight is easily the most unpredictable one we have on the roster. Easily. And let's talk about why. Narratively, if I had to give both Hakari and Uraume grades on their narrative significance, I'd give them both a C+. I know that sounds crazy. I know the Hakari fans out there are like, wait a minute. Enough time has passed and are about to Kagurobachi me. But with that being the case, I want you to hear me out. Hakari was properly introduced into the narrative post-Shibuya. A decent little bit after Shibuya, too, after Yuda's reintroduction. And overall, his general importance to the narrative is so detached and non-important that his major end goal of making his fighting ring succeed literally has nothing to do with the current conflict going on. Like, absolutely nothing at all. He has no real vendetta against Sukuna, except for, taking his teacher away. And he, by proxy, probably wouldn't have much of a vendetta against Uraume, because, they're just there. And thusly, Uraume runs into the same problem. Sure, they are very closely related to Sukuna. They are a direct underling of Sukuna. They're the kitchen whipper, if you will. But that doesn't necessarily make them insanely important. It doesn't make them wildly important. It doesn't make them immune to any sort of L's. And that's the same issue with Hakari. He's not immune to any sort of L's. And I call it an issue, but it's actually a boon. Unlike characters like Kashimo, who are going to fight Sukuna, or characters like Kusakabe, who want to fight Sukuna, or Meme, or Yuda, or Maki, or Yuji, where I am pretty much, I'd say 99.99996784213% sure that, well, they're done, son. The moment they step into the ring, Sukuna's gonna mollywop them all. And unlike even a character like Kenjaku, where I have a general idea of their plan, the cursed conglomerate thing, and I can see how they can achieve it, I have no idea how this battle's going to turn out. Because these characters are both important enough that they've had multiple interactions, a decent amount of screen time, and have very unique abilities that match up in super interesting ways, but neither of them is predetermined to win. Unlike something like Gojo vs. Sukuna, where there was a lot of plot arguments. Unlike something like what's currently happening right now in the manga, Sukuna vs. Kashimo, where there are a lot of plot arguments. Oh, this has to happen for plot, this doesn't have to happen for plot, this, that, and the other. The thing with Uraume versus Hakari is that there is this much plot on the line. Like, maybe that's a bit too much. Maybe about that much. That's how much plot we have to hypothetically see go down in terms of their narrative weight. Like, I just hate to say it, Hakari's not that important, and neither is Uraume. So now this fight is just straight and pure mystery on every single level. And in my opinion, one of the biggest things that made the Hakari versus Kashimo fight so good is the genuine mystery of how these characters interacted, how these characters worked. Everything that went down, that buku bonkers nature of that fight, from Kashimo pulling out the can't miss bull, to his insane fighting ability, to the use of his staff, to Hakari whipping up Jackpot, pulling things left, right, up, down, regenerating crazy ways. The insanity that comes from that fight is all about what we don't know that they can do. In a good way. Not always in a bad way. There are some things where not knowing what a character can do can actually hamper the experience. But in this case, the lack of information on both characters' full scope of abilities is great. The lack of any sort of real narrative weight for both of these characters, at least hefty narrative weight, allows for some flexibility in who could win, which is very, very important to help the investment of a fight. You never want your reader to know who's going to win the fight at the very beginning, because then, like, what are we fighting for? And then the final thing that makes this fight so interesting is because of the contradictory ability matchups. Someone driven by the heat, by the fever, who loves to risk his life in a fantastic gamble, versus someone who is staunch, stern, and ice cold, unwilling to bend under any circumstances, and thusly will end up falling to Hakari. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe Hakari, the restless gambler, shall finally find a place to rest in that airport with everybody else after he loses to Uraume. That's the beauty. There is so much vagueness about the fight. And not in the, oh no, I'm afraid we'll never see anything from the rest of this technique like the Limitless and the Six Eyes, or like the 10 Shadows, or like any technique of any usual significance that could hypothetically be expanded on later. No. I'm excited because these unknowns can all be explained in this battle. We can all stack it up right here, right now, right in front of us. These unknowns are known, which is weird. It's like a weird oxymoron where, Pencil, how do you know what is unknown? But that's the thing. Since I know they have unknowns, I'm more invested in this fight than I am with Sukuna versus Kashimo. Because their unknowns are pretty well known, but the unknowns, despite me knowing of their unknownness, are not known. You know what I'm talking about? I felt like a Kingdom Hearts character. I sound just like Zemnis, bro. Oh, you see, Sora, there's nothing. Nah, but let me just stop talking like a Kingdom Hearts character and talk about how long I think this fight will be. Because I think that's a very important thing, too. Considering these characters generally don't have that much narrative weight overall, but they are important enough. Once again, like a C+ grading. I put them above characters like Momo, Maki. That it? Miwa. I think so. I wouldn't put Hakari even at the top of the important scale of like the JJK high big three of Yuta, Maki, and him. I wouldn't even put him up there, and definitely not above Yuji. But with how long this fight could be, instead of what I think it would be, I think you could easily, especially if we're going to keep introducing new abilities for both these characters and new applications of their abilities, this could easily be a 5 to 6 chapter fight of these two simply adapting to each other and learning to play and outplay the other. Whether it be Uraume understanding Hakari's game, the more and more it gets played and adapting accordingly, or the opposite of Hakari adapting to Uraume's style of play due to the loose and flexible nature of the character and how he goes with the flow more than anybody else. There's that chaos behind it that makes me believe it could easily be a solid 6th chapter. Heck, even the same length as the Kashimo versus Hakari fight. I think that'd be perfectly fine. What I actually think the chapter length will be, though, if it's not like chopped up and interspersed with the Sukuna versus Kashimo battle, which I hope doesn't happen. I hope we lock in on one or lock in on the other. There's no need to hop back and forth. Gege, please don't. But with that being the case, the flexibility that's allowed, the chaos that's allowed, the madness that could come from the Mad Gambler and the Ice Deity is what has me so excited for this battle and why I personally think it could be top 5 in the series. But of course, while I may think the chapter or the battle could be 6 chapters, but I think it'll be around 3, the question is, who do I want to win? Who would I want to win this battle? I wonder who the man who pulled up in J's. Like, let me be real with you. If he pulled up in anything else, if he pulled up in retros or anything like that, like if he pulled up in any other shoe, I may be like, the line on this day, Hakari Kenji's luck has finally ran out. Would go kind of hard. Don't get me wrong. It would go a little bit boo-goo bonkers. Still, the fact that Hakari's pulled up. He's a character of good notoriety. And while I do love the idea of him matching up with Uraume, I do believe the matchup with Sukuna, especially if Sukuna has his domain back, would be even more interesting to see how he deals with that with his domain and Infinite RCT. There's so much more fun stuff, character-wise, interaction-wise, and power-wise from Hakari that I would want to see him make it past this fight. I want this fight to essentially be his Charles fight for the Sukuna being the Kashimo. Not beating the Kashimo, literally being the Kashimo, where Hakari gets jackpot up against a still relatively powerful, Charles was okay, opponent, and then leaping up to the level of a true, proper opponent, which would be Sukuna in this case. Uraume would be the stepping stone. And, maybe Gege's feeling kind. If Gege's feeling kind, which I think they would be with Hakari, they seem to really like Hakari, I wouldn't be shocked if Hakari made it out of this, but fell to Sukuna, and vice versa. I wouldn't be shocked if Hakari fell to Uraume and didn't even get to battle Sukuna. That's the thing. There's so much crazy stuff that's up in the air that it has me super duper excited and has me believing that this fight will, in fact, be a top 5. However, that's what I think. Please what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you hit that little notification bell so you do not miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below where you can support for as low as $1 a month. Get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. And also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Now, Thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dago the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our $3 members, Recliner Plays, Red Wolf 4765, and Perp Skills. I'd like to give another thank you to our $5 patrons, Sean, Red Wolf 4765, Midnight Gem Lord, Kevin, and Demix LND. I'd like to give another very big thank you to our $10 patrons, Robbie Ochia and Idemokami. I'd like to give a hefty thank you to our $25 member, Alex Ice Rose. I'd like to give another gargantuan thank you to our $25 patrons, Igneel and Calvin Elder.